Hey, y'all, and welcome to the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies for Black feminist world building and creative actualization. The weekly-ish podcasts and newsletters are presented by Seeda School, where all this theory that we get into inside the episodes meets practice, right? We actually practice what we are preaching, theorizing, thinking about, feeling inside of Seeda School. And if this is your first time tuning in, Seeda is a school with offerings for supporting you inside your world building and creative entrepreneurship practice. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back and thank you for being here. And I also have an exciting announcement. The world building workshop is back. So we have an upcoming world building workshop for you scheduled for Tuesday, August 19th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And inside this workshop, we will use the Element X quadrant to locate the work rooted in your zone of validation versus your zone of desire. You may have heard me use, or other Seeda schoolers use that language before, right? Zone of desire. So we'll talk more about that and you'll learn more about what that actually is inside of the workshop. And then what we'll do is we'll explore three ways to expand time spent inside your zone of desire through seeding your own newsletter, selling your own creative offer, right? Or systemizing your existing creative offer for recurring revenue. The link is in the show notes if this is something you're interested in and if you want to register for free. You can also inside of this workshop learn more about the three one-on-one coaching paths inside of Seeda School. So again, link is in the show notes if you want to register for that and learn more about Seeda School's coaching offering. All right, y'all. Before diving in, we are going to start like we always start every single podcast with our grounding podcast ritual, right? We give ourselves inside of this ritual permission to breathe into the present moment. We're going to take just a quick beat to become aware of our surroundings, to get curious about what's happening inside of our sensorium. I'm going to take three deep, full belly breaths, and I'm going to invite you to do the same if that feels possible in this moment. All right, y'all. Let's begin. Three deep, deep breaths. Now, what could we sense going on inside of our sensorium, right? Something that we can see, touch, taste, smell, hear, something that we were able to even feel beyond the senses that we may even have language for. What can you sense in this very moment? Or what did you sense inside of that pocket of pause, inside of those three deep breaths? I know for me, I am sensing my incense burning in the background. I also hear family in the background chatting, and catching up. And I can also see my hair. So if you are watching on YouTube and or on Spotify and you heard me the last episode, Your girl was like, wait, I'm waiting on the next character drop, the next character download. This hair got to come in the mail ASAP. And it is here. So I can also sense my excitement and joy about that. But how about you? What are you sensing in this very moment? Now let's check in on our mood and intention right now inside of this very moment. So, my mood, y'all, is full of conviction. Okay. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The more systems of oppression and domination try to weaken our resolve and create narratives of powerlessness, the roots I feel, the roots of my love growing deeper and my conviction getting even sturdier, right? I too watch the news. I see all the calls for righteous rage and despair. Right? Starvation in Gaza, man-made disasters repackaged as natural disasters, heavy air quotes. And just, the continuous casual violence of Black death, right? The business as usual casual violence of Black death. I see it all. And as I watch my grief transmute into agency, I get even more audacious with each passing day, each passing hour. So that's my big mood. That's how I'm arriving. What's your big mood? How are you arriving to this space and time that we're sharing together? Can you give yourself 3 seconds to feel what you feel without judgment? Let's pause and check in there. Now, as a part of our podcast ritual, we check into our sensorium. We check in on our mood, and then we also check in on our intention, right? We do nothing without intention. We know that our intention kind of shapes our attention, which is a very, 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 very like sacred vessel through which we can actualize worlds through, right? So we want to be very intentional about what it is we're doing and the why behind it. So, my intention behind this episode, behind recording this episode, is to invite you to seed a public creative practice through what we call in Seeda School weekly dispatches for time accountability, or you can call them creative dispatches for time freedom, right? Whatever your desired relationship is with time, committing to a cadence of newsletters, podcasts, videos, as dispatches becomes a public ritual of staying close to yourself. Becomes a sacred ceremony of this like bi-directional witnessing, right? And inside this sacred witnessing, we don't need your professionalism. We need your poetry, friend. Okay? We don't need your cynicism. We need your care. We don't need your cool, right? We need your conviction. And at times it can feel easier to write, cover letters, grant applications, school applications, or memos on the job because professional development rarely requires our honesty. Some career conscious spaces even encourage our lies, asking us to do something as silly as leave our politics at the door as if we ever could. It can feel harder to write for ourselves, to see the public practice through creative writing because our poetry demands our truth. Our poetry demands that we acknowledge our pleasure and politics as the only starting points we need to create work worthy of our breath. Okay. So, my intention inside this episode is to share spells for doing exactly that. What's your intention behind listening to this episode? I'm going to pause here and let you reflect on that. All right, y'all. Now that we are grounded inside of our sensorium, let's get into today's podcast episode. Episode 82. Professionalism demands our lives. Poetry demands our honesty. So, listen, I'm going to enter this podcast episode as I do every episode, and that's with a story. This time, the story is going to come from my most recent newsletter titled Suicidal Ideation on the Subway. The subtitle, Taking Me to a World Beyond the Cul-de-sac. I'm going to back into this episode by reading that newsletter, that personal essay here. And I have it printed out because that just felt appropriate. Okay. So it starts with a quote by Ntozake Shange from Lillian, Resurrection of the Daughter. She goes, "You pull these startling elements onto a canvas of your own, and that's your life." Suicidal ideation on the subway, taking me to a world beyond the cul-de-sac. The content warning is in the title. We often talk about our enough numbers and scenarios. I'm sitting here crying real tears because I am writing a novel on desire. I can't tell you how good it feels to release, how good it feels to let it be enough. I'm a writer. Holy shit. I'm a fucking writer, and I can't tell you how good it feels to finally believe it, to finally let myself be it as I type through real tears. I kid you not. The only 2 years in my life when I didn't create art were the only 2 years in my life when I had suicidal ideation. I would ride the A and the C train, ha ha, my initials, very funny, every morning around 7 a.m. and would get back on the same train going in the opposite direction at 7 p.m. I kid you not. And it was there in the wind of 7 p.m. that I thought about it most often. Wondering what would have happened if I jumped in front of the train just 3 seconds before it moved my hair away from my face like a lover I'd been looking for all over. What would have happened? And would it have been any worse than this? This was 2018. This was 12-hour days commuting to and from a tech job with the culture of compulsive overworking. This was relentless. Sometimes I would think about it on the street. When I saw a taxi speeding nowhere fast, I would imagine stepping in front of it, longing for a coma. I kid you not. Longing for a pause, a moment's rest, for it all to stop, just for a minute or two or three, take me nowhere fast, just so I can sleep. Yeah. For every taxi I saw an NYPD car, but never in a million lifetimes would I dream of jumping in front of one of those. Wouldn't dare give the heathens the satisfaction. I would rather continue carrying around the heaviness of depression than give them cause for celebration. Another nigga dead, no matter how bad I wanted to sleep. Nah. At one point, the taxi and the lover who would blow the hair out of my face before it entered the tunnel could get it, though. This visceral longing to pause my life, sometimes momentarily, sometimes permanently, went on for 2 whole years. 2 whole years, starting at 25 when I had finally done it. I had finally got the job where they give you a laptop on the first day, along with healthcare and a pinky promise to match your 401k contributions. I had finally got a roof that wasn't held up by my mama. I had finally moved to my dream city, and this wasn't like my freshman year of college when the Upper East Side got too unnerving to bear, or at 24 when I moved to New York with $1,000 in my bank account and a great deal on a Bed-Stuy apartment that reeked of cat piss. No. This time, I was doing it the right way, and the right way almost killed me. Oh, 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 oh. It was so hard to breathe back there inside the cul-de-sac of right way. I began my escape by listening to my creative spirit. The air feels scarce on the road most traveled, but if you come out here with me on this unpaved road, in this open field, in this wilderness, you'll notice your lungs start to filter a breathable possibility, it would say. Speaking of enough numbers and enough scenarios, did I tell you I'm writing a novel? So much space, an abundance of air, a breath we let, and we're breathing. Oh, yes, we're breathing, and you're doing it with me, it would say. It's a far out feeling, being all the way out here off the beaten path, composting my every fear at the altar of my creative spirit. I went down every path I was taught and always had to step off the trail to drop the mask and catch my breath. I ran out of places to go, places to run to, places to hide. So I asked my creative spirit to show me paths and possibilities I haven't yet been taught. A new way. And guess what? My creative spirit invited me to new paths, and I ignored them for a while, thinking they must have the wrong address. These visions required more from me than I thought I could hold. But every time the tension of aliveness would loosen when I surrendered to the path I had been shown. A vision that I had ignored, an invitation my creative spirit kept sending to my address, a Black feminist world building school, it would say. I dodged and kicked this can down the road for as long as I could until I couldn't any longer. I said yes, and the tension of aliveness loosened. But where do you start with a vision this audacious? So far, 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 far beyond the cul-de-sac of right way. I started at the only place I knew for sure. I started the way I always do, with a story about a non-binary biotechnologist named Seeda living in an abolitionist community without police or prisons named Psychofa. A story narrated by an ancient bald cypress tree named Psy. I made Psychophian ceramic artifacts and cornrowed my hair like a Psychophian. I made a Psychophian couch and Psychophian clothes. I made a Psychophian curriculum. I wrote the story in collaboration with creative writing software. I engineered that generated Psy's voice. On this new path, I made the artifacts before the story existed. And it was through living inside the material expression of the world beyond the cul-de-sac that I was able to write a new story, then build a new school. A vision I once thought was too big for my hands to hold. This journey has shown me a new path back to my creative spirit. And inside the paths we create together. The invitation is to fear not the audacity of the visions revealed to you because you were never meant to hold them alone. Your magic is in the middle. Your magic is in the middle. Your magic is in the middle. Imagine if I had given up in Brooklyn, went all the way to the end, never saying yes to the invitation from my creative spirit, went all the way to the end, inside the suffocating cul-de-sac of right way, with no room for the uncertainty of discovery, with no unpaved roads not yet traveled, no open fields for playing, for being wrong, for being free. I didn't give up. Instead, I left my job, mourned the end of a romantic relationship I couldn't take with me, moved to ancestral family land, and a 3-month sabbatical turned into 3 years, and 3 years turned into 5, and 5 years and counting a full-time artist practice, and later stewardship of a 6-figure Black feminist world building school. I look back on it now, and every step inside and beyond the cul-de-sac does seem like it was divinely guided. A curriculum for conviction, a path ultimately designed for my highest good, even when it didn't feel like it. From Brooklyn, New York, to Dawn, Virginia, and everything in between, it was magical. So, y'all, that was the most recent dispatch, the most recent personal essay of mine, Suicidal Ideation on the Subway, taking me to a world beyond the cul-de-sac. And I wanted to start with that essay and kind of back into this podcast episode by way of that essay. Because sometimes it feels safer to not be so raw, so wide open, so vulnerable. But the gag is we already are. We were born vulnerable. Running away from how we were born is a kind of death. Like James Baldwin said, if I love you and I duck it, I die. And I cannot stop thinking about that exchange between him and Maya Angelou. And I cited it in the show notes. But I will admit, this dispatch was a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more personal than I usually go in my personal essays. But this is what happened. I already had the episode title planned. And then this dispatch flooded through a couple days later. And I was like, hold up. This isn't what I wanted to talk about. What is this? What are we doing? Then I remembered I'm an artist and my job is to get out the way. So I was like, well, let me get out the way. Right? It's flooding through because someone needs it, even if that someone is me, especially if that someone is me. And listen, I don't share nothing I'm not ready to share, right? This was 5, 7 years ago. And again, this dispatch flowed out of my body declaring that it was ready to be released. And it showed up right before I recorded this episode as if this story wanted to be used to illustrate this point, right? Professionalism wants our lies. A professionalized creative practice even wants our lies, but our poetry wants our honesty, wants us to come out of hiding, right? And this doesn't mean we don't have a private life with the right to opacity. right? And an inner world to protect. And it doesn't mean we engage in like unprofessional, inappropriate behavior, right? But it does mean we look for ways our honest release can be in service to ourselves and others. Now, Ursa Daly Ward said, I really, 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 really hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly. They say, I write best when I stop trying to be brilliant and start trying to be honest. Y'all, this is it. Whenever you sit down to compose your next dispatch, right? Try leading with honesty and it will shine. This is how we come into contact with our brilliance. I have another story for you to illustrate this point. So in the newsletter, I alluded to my experience writing my book, right? And if you've been following my journey for a while, then you know I signed with my literary agent in the beginning of 2024. When she was like, she slid into my email, was like, I think you have a book. And I was like, I do. Thank you for noticing. So what did I initially do? I spent most of 2024 setting out to write the book I knew would sell, right? A Black feminist self-help book on world building and creative practice. An artist way, but for Black feminists. I knew how the whole, like how I would pitch it and everything, where it would sit in the market. I knew I could see it. I knew all of it. I could trace the line from beginning to end. And it was easy to write, right? But as I was writing it, I started to become aware that I was writing a book to advance my career and not my soul, not my spirit. I was writing the book that would increase Seeda School's revenue and maybe even my profile as an artist, facilitator, coach, world builder, but not necessarily writing the book I long to read. And here's the thing, I wanted both. Okay. I wanted the revenue and the eroticism of not being able to draw a straight line from beginning to end, right? This is when I discovered writing a book isn't hard. Creative practice isn't hard, right? Writing a book that feels marketable is actually easy. Engaging in creative practice or just, general labor that is marketable is actually easy. Traditionally marketable, I should say, is actually easy. And as we alluded to earlier in the episode, we might find writing cover letters, grant applications, grad school applications, on-the-job memos, etc., to be quite easy on our nervous system. Right? Our nervous system can maybe kind of like crank those out, no problem. It's when the writing or when the creative practice project work feels too weird, when the idea feels too weird, too niche, too wet with poetry, right? Too like just dripping with honesty, that it feels confronting. That's when it feels confronting. And this confrontation asks that we use our desire, our poetry, to refuse capitalism by serving ourselves first, trusting it will serve our readers, our viewers, our audience, our clients, our dream participants, right? Whoever we want to call the folks our work is serving. And if you check out the page where you can register for the free upcoming world building workshop that's linked in the show notes, you'll notice there's 3 coaching paths inside of Seeda School. Seed your practice, sell and offer, and systemize your business. Seed a practice is the first path because we start by attracting an audience we can sell our creative offers to. In path two, we talk about how we can immediately launch and get like our first 10 clients, right? Without maybe even necessarily having to build an audience. But if we want to do this like longer term investment in our creative practice, we do want to start by establishing some sort of cadence of releasing creative dispatches and building an audience who starts to know, like, and trust us and starts to, figure out if they're aligned with our point of view in the worlds we're building, right? So seed practice is the first path for this exact reason, right? We attract an audience aligned with our zone of desire, right? And then we eventually sell and offer to that audience that is also aligned with our zone of desire. But the tension that often arises in the first phase before we even get to creating our offers is making the move behind hiding or making the move from hiding behind professionalism to rooting in the power of our poetry, our honesty, our brilliance, right? It's like the searching and grasping and reaching for our voice. Professionalism requires our lies, and poetry requires our honesty, our honest voice. And we want to attract clients aligned with our truth, right? Not the perceived sense of safety in the flatness of our professional performances. And listen, y'all, this feels like a necessary disclaimer, right? Sometimes we lie to these corporations and these institutions to get to the bag. All right. They do it. We all do it, right? A little resume fluff here, a little transcript doctoring there, right? Some fluffy, flowery BS language in the grant application for good measure, right? I want to be clear. Ain't nobody judging you for code switching and going to battle with lies to facilitate your survival in a class war. No one's judging that. This is not an indictment on that, right? Sometimes we got to do what we got to do to get to where we're going. What I am asking inside of this episode is, where do we honestly want to go? Right? If we got to do what we got to do to get where we're going, where do we really actually want to go, y'all? And will we allow that path to be paved with our truth? Now, here are some spells for practicing honesty, practicing poetry, no matter where you are in your creative journey. Spell number one: use your sensorium as a prompt to get to the truth, to get to your truth, right? Enter the mundane to access the marvelous. I start every podcast episode, workshop, and one-on-one coaching call with grounding in our sensorium. Not only to ground us in our body, but to also acknowledge and give thanks to the resources of creative inspiration always already all around us. Before starting your next newsletter, podcast script, video script, etc., right? Don't be intimidated by the blank page. Engage your sensorium to engage the page. What can you hear, smell, see, touch, feel, taste? What can you feel beyond senses we even have language for, right? Let that be your first sentence. Ground in your sensorium. Bird song is wafting through the window. Ground in your sensorium. I can smell the lavender from my tea. Ground in your sensorium. My hands feel clammy and my feet feel cold. Right? Let that be an opening that starts you through like this grounding this embodied sense of groundedness inside of your present moment and inside of your present truth. Spell number 2, honor your attempt with an acknowledgement of the rigor it is asking of you. I love this one. Essay translates to an attempt in French, right? And I'll sometimes have clients reach out to me via voice note and text inside of our private Discord chats while doing their personal essay homework in between our one-on-one sessions. And they'll say something like, Ayana, to be honest, I'm stuck. I don't know where to start. Help, I need some support. I don't know if this is worthy of publishing, right? I don't have anything original to say, etc., etc., etc. And I'm always like, what if we started there? What if that was the original sentence? To be honest, I'm stuck. To be honest, I feel like I don't have anything original to say. If I'm honest, I don't know if this feels worthy of publishing. Right? And then what if we started with that truth? Started with this truthful acknowledgement that what we are embarking on is rigorous, and started to kind of like continue to dig under the hood of that truth. And whenever they say that, I'm like, what if that was the first sentence? What if the honest way we're showing up to the page was our first sentence? Whenever they start the dispatch that way, whenever I have a client that starts the dispatch that way, every single time, I kid you not, they send me a personal essay ahead of our next call to review that sings with their poetry, sings with their power. That first sentence of honest acknowledgement unlocks not what they think they should say, but what wants to be expressed with their permission. Right? Oftentimes, the first step is giving our poetry permission. Spell number 3, third and final spell. Unsubscribe from cringe culture, y'all. Just hit the unsubscribe button on not wanting to be cringe, wanting to be the cool, mysterious artist. In an interview with Sarah Ferguson, Ocean Vuong says in his 11th year of teaching, he's noticed students are getting more and more, quote, self-conscious of trying. He says he talks about cringe culture as not wanting to be perceived, right? Or caught inside an effortful and earnest attempt at our dreams. So sometimes we resort to cynicism to appear more intellectual, right? Too cool to try, right? Sometimes we resort to this performance of cynicism to save face and protect ourselves from the vulnerability of our honest attempts, our poetry. And this is a prison of our own making. It's a holding cell of sorts that we can break free from at any time, allowing ourselves to be witnessed inside of our truths. Y'all, like, this is why I am so big on weekly dispatches and public practice. There is something so sacred about bi-directional witnessing that expands the permission and the landscape of poetry for us all, right? It gives us all permission to dream otherwise, right? We read something and all of a sudden, kind of like the hold of professionalism, professionalization of creative practice starts to loosen. Suddenly, the worlds that we're dreaming about feel a little bit closer, right? And I feel us all dropping the performance of cynicism and unsubscribing from cringe culture all at the same time. I feel our power rising and vibrating, and it is, Y'all, such a beautiful moment to be inside of creative practice, to be inside of world building practice. So here are some seeds to reflect on inside this week. What if we cared less about being right and cared more about being honest? Like Alexis Pauline Gumbs said, we didn't come here to be right. We came here to love. No, we didn't come here to be the smartest in the room. We came here to love. We didn't come here to be impressive. We came here to love. We didn't come here to earn our breath. We came here to love. What if we allowed our writing to become a mirror that reflected this truth? What potential clients would we attract? What income generating offers would we develop and sell? Full of dignity. What worlds could get funded? What businesses could we build? And how could they help us reimagine the culture of work? How could the worlds that we fund and the businesses that we build help us engage in work worthy of our breath? What could our poetry make possible if we honestly allowed ourselves to dream at the scale of world building? All right, y'all. So we are moving into the invitation portion of this podcast. I want you to feel free to use the prompts, the seeds, the reflections that I just raised, the questions that I just raised. You can work with those inside your practice this week. You can also work with the spells that I shared inside this episode this week. And if you want support, actualizing worlds rooted in the truth of your desire and the honesty of your poetry. As I mentioned, we have an upcoming world building workshop scheduled for Tuesday, August 19th, 2025 at noon Eastern Standard Time. And again, this workshop, inside this workshop, we will use the Element X quadrant to locate the work rooted in your zone of validation versus your zone of desire. Then we will explore 3 ways to expand time spent inside your zone of desire through seeding your newsletter, seeding your own newsletter, right? Selling your own creative offer, or systemizing your existing creative offer for recurring revenue, right? We can also talk about creating a sales system inside of your offer, right? Taking your offer from a single, like one-off thing to an actual business, if that's something that you're desiring to do. So the link is in the show notes if you want to register for free and learn more about how Seeda School's 3 paths for one-on-one creative business coaching can support you wherever you are inside of your creative practice. Truly, thank you for tuning into another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might see, resource, and deepen creative practices rooted in collective liberation. I firmly believe we all came into this world creative. We all came into this world with something to offer. And deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love instead of politics of fear, right? These are the beliefs we try to honor inside Seeda School. And the best way to support this podcast is by sharing it with a friend or taking a screenshot or screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. You will never, ever, 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 ever see a Seeda School ad while scrolling the metaverse. So I'm putting my faith in you in the work instead. I want you to hear about Seeda School from a loved one you trust, not Meta, right? I'm so much more interested in sustaining this work through word of mouth. So tell a friend to tell a friend if you want to keep these episodes coming. I heard rating and leaving a review helps too. The second best way to support is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Seeda School Substack at $5 a month, but only if you have the capacity, the financial capacity to do so. All right, y'all. Until next week. So be it. See to it. Breathe through it.